Hello, I'm Joe Welinske. I'm the program manager for the ConveyUX conference taking place in Seattle in February. And I'm lucky enough to get a chance to talk with many of our speakers. And I'm enthused to be speaking with our keynote presenter today, Jakob Nielsen. Hello, Jakob. How are you?
Hi, Joe. I'm good. How are you doing?
Everything's good. I'm in Seattle. Where are you speaking to us from today?
I'm in Silicon Valley, actually in San Jose. So,
All right. Well, I'm sure most of our past participants, prospective participants, anybody watching this video are already familiar with your work. You've been involved in our field for so long, but I always like to take the chance to introduce my colleagues to possibly newcomers to the field. So maybe we could just start out a little bit with you talking about your background and the types of things that you're involved in.
exactly. Well, my background goes back, quite a long time, and so by the time of the conference, it'll be 33 years since I started on user interfaces, and back in 1983. So, and since then, I really worked on two main themes, and the one was online information, and the other one was how to make computers easy to use, so usability, as we usually call it. And so those two themes, kind of merged together quite nicely when the web came out, back in the mid 90s, I guess. And so for the last more than 20 years, I really focused on that kind of combination of those two questions, online information and how to make computers easy, mainly on the question of web design. And I think what differentiates me from a lot of other people in this field is that I am very deeply grounded in human behavior and in observing what people do when they're on the computer. And then this goes back to before the web, when we were looking at even mainframe usability, or when the first graphical user interfaces came out, we were looking at how can people use a mouse and how can people use Windows and things like that. And today it's how can they use websites, how can they use mobile phones, how can they use the wrist computer and whatever is the next one. We've started doing a little bit of work on kind of wall-sized displays and really huge, more gesture-based interfaces. So I mean, the technology definitely varies a lot, but again, what that's not my true love. I mean, I actually like technology because I'm a little bit of a geek, at heart, but I'm that humanistic geek, I guess. So I do focus on what are the users doing, what are the people doing.
Well, you make it easy for people to keep up with you somewhat because you're always posting interesting information. I read your new articles that come out just about every week. Let me just ask you, out of all the things you've been working on, are there any things that you're particularly enthused about lately? Things that you're digging into that you're finding interesting results for?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you just the latest study that we did just last week, which related to the question of minimalism in web design. And so minimalism is this notion that you scale back a lot of that kind of fluff that a lot of websites, particularly, used to have. I mean, it was really bad in the old days. It's not always quite as bad today, but there's still this kind of, I guess, campaign to making even more scaled back sites. But what we saw in this study was that, I mean, some interesting findings about that, but also that users really do care a lot about the content and the writing and the headlines and things like that. And so that's what I call content usability. So the total user experience is the user interface, but it's more so actually the content. And sad to say, a lot of the time the content is not very good on these websites. It's certainly often not written for the web. Also, I mean, it's not just writing, it's also things like photographs, which are often really bad as well. I mean, e-commerce sites, a lot of them could probably double or triple their sales with better product photography. So this is really still a neglected area, I think, even after this many years, of really producing the information that people are there for.
So, like, I remember going back about 15 years ago, your group wrote, you were involved with the article that was talking about the idea that while people might not be reading information in the traditional sense, that they scan for meaningful information through headings.
Definitely.
And it's just a different way of presenting that information. And I think that continues to be relevant today.
Exactly. And then later, when we started doing eye tracking, we kind of found that it's even more restricted than that. I mean, yes, the headings are super, super important, but often it's just like the first two words are kind of what pulls people in, because when they look down a page, or let's say they look down a search listing with 10 choices, or maybe a little bit more than 10 choices for them, people don't even have time to read a full line. So one line of text is often too much for people to read. That came actually to the foreground again in this minimalism study we did last week, where these sites are pretty scaled back. There's not a lot of stuff on the screen, and yet you found like a site would had like maybe this much text, like a paragraph of text, and that was already too much for the user, in the sense that they didn't get all the information contained in that paragraph, even though that was all, I mean, there were a little decoration, but not very much. But a paragraph of text is too much. I mean, we've also had in other studies, people say about like, with a form, fill in this form, and it's like 2 lines of instructions. That's too much instructions. You know, I mean, it's like, it's amazing, but this is why we do these studies. We really observe how people really behave, and they don't behave the way that the designers or the content owner or the site owner would like them to do. I mean, people are very rushed, I would say, and why are they rushed? They're rushed because there are hundreds of millions of websites out there, so they're not going to like treasure yours in particular, and they're not going to spend that much time on it. And we have to produce, both the design and the writing for that circumstance.
Do you have any thoughts or research about the idea of how the idea of people's patience for consuming information might vary between, say, a consumer-facing app versus some type of mission-critical internal IT software where it's a person's daily job to work with that?
Right. Well, I mean, it's certainly not. There are differences, but that said, there are also similarities, and the similarities go back to the point it's the human we're talking about, and it's the same person who, part of the day, they are off like surfing for the fun of it, or for buying something, or for looking up vacation destinations or whatever, and other times of the day they're a business person, and they're spending maybe millions of dollars in a B2B selection. It's the same person, and when we have done studies of B2B sites, we find that people really say, well, I'm used to it's going to be this easy when I buy like a $5 paperback at Amazon.com. Why can't it be the same easy when I'm spending $1 million? It should be better when I'm spending $1 million when I'm spending $5, right? But it's actually usually worse. And so we definitely see that. That said, we also see, that people will dig deeper when there's more at stake and so forth. Another difference is also in the reading levels. So we typically tend to recommend, if you're targeting a broad consumer audience, like sort of basically kind of everybody, if you're selling something or promoting something that targets really a broad section of the population, you've got to write very, very simplistic text. And we say 8th grade reading level, which is a separate question from writing to 8th grade, kids. It's writing to adults, assuming it's, that type of product, but it's writing with simplified sentence structures, not kind of very convoluted sentence structures, not long sentences, not difficult words, because a lot of the average people, they have pretty poor reading skills, to be honest. On the other hand, if you're targeting, let's say, a bunch of engineers or doctors, physicians, that type of audience, they will typically tend to be higher educated, better reading skills. That said, I have endless videos of users these type of people saying, I don't want to read that much. I don't want to feel I'm back in medical school just because I'm looking for stuff for the clinic or something. And so you can write, you can definitely use the specialized terminology of the engineer or the physician or the whatever targeted audience you have, right? But but still try to make it easy because these people appreciate ease of use just as much as anybody else.
Well, at the very start, you mentioned that you've been involved in this area for quite a long time, for 30
Right.
some years. At the conference here in Seattle in February, the title of your presentation, State of the Art Evolving Challenges and Opportunities in UX Design. So maybe give us a little bit of a preview of what you're thinking about, some of your thoughts that you're going to be bringing to Seattle.
Yeah. Well, so I'm trying to look. I mean, first of all, of course, we don't know what the world will be like, by then, but so there'll probably be some new things. But that's the point almost. There's always some new thing. And yet we got to grasp back and look at how humans approach it. And those things tend to be more stable. So what I'm trying to go and look at is this kind of like big waves of innovation and change in the user experience field. And that's one of the benefits of having been in it for a while is that, let's say something like the watch computer that we do know is out. Um, that's not in something really new to me, right? Because we did studies of mobile phones long before the iPhone, and at that point of time, those phone screens were this big. They were the size of a watch computer today. So a lot of those same things, we kind of see again and again, and so the challenge becomes what are the commonalities and what are the differences, because it's also not identically the same as it was 15 years ago, but there are differences too. But so that becomes some of the interesting things, I think, to me, is looking at those really big waves of change and similarity that we've seen over those last more than 30 years I've been in this business.
I know the last time that we talked, I believe you were also you mentioned that over the years, having seen a lot of different things, that in some ways you've seen things develop in a positive direction. Other things maybe not develop as quickly in a better way as you might have hoped.
That's also true, yeah. I definitely think that if I go back and think about myself, more than 30 years ago, and what would I have thought of, the current state, I mean, in some ways, I would have been thrilled and say there were a lot of interesting things, and things have definitely gotten better. I mean, if you try to do things now compared to 30 years ago or 20 years ago, or even just 10 years ago, a lot of things actually do work much better now. Uh, but at the same time, there's also a lot of things that have not changed very much. And where we have I see people post on various discussion groups a lot of the same questions, like, how do I get management to believe in doing user testing? That that question could have been asked 30 years ago, and so we see a lot of things that are not improved nearly as much. And I would even say kind of like setbacks, that we get some new technologies come out and people get kind of overly enthused over that, and they think of that kind of, oh, this is the magic bullet, if only we can do this, and like if only we can have speech recognition, or the little intelligent assistant that can help you and all those things. If only we can get that, and all this usability stuff can go away. And it really doesn't. I mean, every new generation of technology, it often gets the same problems back again that we sort of had 10 years before in a slightly different form. But if you've been there in the past, you can kind of recognize that we see a lot of the same things. But I mean, that said, I still think that what would I rather have, today's computer or a 30-year-old computer? And user interface. I'd rather have today's user interface for sure. I mean, so I think that's the optimistic thing, right? Again, things have just gotten much better in the user experience field compared to the old days. And I mean, so when you work in it, when sort of in the trenches, you can get very frustrated over that. Why can't people do this obvious thing, and why do you have to say the same thing 20 times before they'll listen? But on the other hand, the bigger picture is really very optimistic.
All right, great. Well, I appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk with me about this, introduce yourself to people out there, and I'll be looking forward to hosting you here in Seattle in February.
Definitely, I'm looking forward to it. So see you then.
All right,
Thank
thanks
you.
a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.